What's up guys, I'm Drew and welcome back to another episode of DIY Dudes. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to install laminate vinyl plank flooring in your basement the right way. The key thing you need to consider is that when you're working in a basement, you're probably installing the flooring over top of a concrete base. The thing to worry about there is that your concrete is porous and over time it's going to suck moisture out from the ground beneath it into your living space above it. And you're going to want to make sure that you have appropriate materials to block out that moisture. I'm going to be using two products to form the subfloor beneath my vinyl plank flooring. The first is a dimpled moisture barrier made of plastic. The next is a premium EvaFoam underpad. The two of them combined together are going to keep water out and keep my floor nice and soft. So before you install any flooring, you're going to want to check the entire area you're working for high and low spots. Use a 4-foot level and just kind of work it around the area, and that'll be able to tell pretty quick if you have a high spot or a low spot. And if you have a high spot, you're going to want to use a grinder with a concrete grinding disc attachment to basically just work the floor until it's nice and smooth. And if you have a low spot like I have here, you're going to need to get some sort of cement or concrete and just fill it up, make sure it's nice and flat, and you'll be good to go. I need to cut the bottom of my door jambs to make sure that I have enough room to slide the vinyl flooring underneath. I'm going to use a piece of 1/2-inch drywall because the height of my subfloor combined with my vinyl flooring plank is about 1/2 inch. So this drywall, I can use it as a template, and I can actually have my multi-tool blade ride on top of it to make sure that I cut it at the right height. Before you start laying any floor, do a thorough vacuum to make sure your entire surface area is nice and clean. Whenever you start installing the underlayment, you're going to want to start in the corner of a room where you have a nice straight run and just roll it out. The thing is, it is going to want to roll back in on itself, so just use heavy weights to hold it down. In my case, I use boxes of flooring, which you're probably going to have as well, and they seem to work great. The underlayment can be cut with a utility knife, so if you have a 45-degree angle like we have here, just kind of roll the material against the wall and cut along the edge and fold it nicely into place. Once you get a couple pieces laid out, you're going to need to join the two together. To do that, use a piece of moisture-proof tape and slowly work your way along the entire seam and just make sure it's nice and flat. When you're butting two pieces together, the easiest way to make sure that you get a nice flat joint is to overlay the two on top of each other and then run your utility knife over top of the two pieces so that you get a nice clean cut and a perfect butt joint. Once you're confident that the two pieces are perfectly butted, just use a piece of moisture-proof tape to seal them up. For precise corners and working around door jambs, just go slow, roll the underlayment out into the corners, and then just kind of fold it and work your knife in to make the cuts. You might need to cut it 2 or 3 times to get it right, but just go slow and it'll work out. I used a premium quality EvaFoam underlayment that actually has an adhesive strip and overlapping material built into it. So the key thing is when you're installing these, make sure the two joints are butted up perfectly touching each other, peel off the adhesive strip, and then overlay the material to make sure you get a nice seal. The great thing about this material is it's super easy to cut and super easy to work with, just like the other underlayment material. You can cut it with a utility knife. Now that we have our underlayment installed, we're finally ready to start installing some floor. Before I do that, I want to show you guys a few tools that are going to make my life a lot easier during this install, and the first of which is a pull bar specifically designed to install floor. I'll show you how we use that in a few minutes. I'm going to use that in combination with a rubber mallet. And to give you guys a quick overview of the flooring, I'm using a rigid luxury vinyl plank flooring, totally waterproof, connects tongue and groove along the seam and the butt joint. So before I start my first course, I definitely want to make sure that I stagger my joints. So I'm actually going to cut 2 additional pieces at 1/3 and 2/3 length, and then use that to make sure my joints are staggered at each offset row, and continue that pattern the rest of the way through the floor. And I'm going to want to make sure that I do this run along the entire length of the wall. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use scrap pieces of flooring as spacers between the floor and the wall to leave a little bit of an expansion gap that'll be concealed later by the trim. As you're installing the floor, you need to make sure that it's 100% straight along the whole length, because this first course is going to establish your square for the entire run of the room. As you're installing these planks, the joints may not line up 100% when you first install them. In fact, they may be slightly raised here. So have a scrap piece of flooring material and use that as a backing against your hammer, so you can actually kind of tap this in place do a couple good bangs, and that'll make sure it's sealed nice and tight. The other thing that you're gonna run into is when you install these planks, not only the joint might not be sealed properly, but it also might be slightly offset. You need to make sure that your joints are 100% aligned at every plank as you work your way across the entire floor to make sure that the joints are sealed and that your floor is entirely square. In order to do that, use that same piece of scrap material, lay it down on the floor, actually use the tongue and groove to lock it in joint with the next piece, and then this is where your pry bars come into play. Pry against the scrap piece of material, lock your pry bar in place, and then use your hammer to tap it shut. What that's gonna do is you're gonna make sure that you're not damaging your floor because you're using the sacrificial piece of flooring rather than the good plank. When you're installing the first course, it's a little bit difficult to actually get these butt joints to lock together. So you pretty much need to install 2 runs and then come back and lock this butt joint into place. So I'm gonna go ahead and tap this joint into place and lock the 2 pieces together, but you're gonna have to be somewhat careful and kind of monitor this as you go, because if you're installing this and that key breaks or cracks and you don't necessarily notice, that joint will separate at a later date. So as you're going, if you do notice that one breaks, go back and replace the piece to ensure that you don't have to come back after you've installed your entire run of floor to fix an unsightly gap. So I'm gonna show you guys how to make a cut with this simple and easy to use multi-tool. This is definitely a tool that any DIYer or pro is gonna wanna have in their toolbox. It's gonna save you time, energy, and a whole lot of headache for cutting around the base of door jambs and cutting those very intricate and multi-angled cuts that you're gonna have to make in corners and various situations you're gonna come up to while you're installing the floor. So I picked this guy up for like $40 at my local hardware store. It's very inexpensive, easy to use, and I would definitely recommend it for your installation. I cut this with my multi-tool, and you can see just how difficult this would have been to cut on a skill saw or miter saw. And honestly, the multi-tool cut through this thing like butter, very little effort, and absolute precision in the corners. So now I'm gonna measure to cut this piece for width. One key thing that I'm gonna take into consideration is I'm gonna check both sides of the piece because I've just come across an entire room. I wanna make sure that my measurement is correct because it may not be square. I might have lost ½ an inch over that entire length of the room. So we'll see how good this flooring job turned out. Yeah. This side is about 3 inches. And this side's about 3 1/4 inches. So I'm gonna cut this piece with a little bit of a taper. Perfect. Okay, perfect. The way that worked out with the cut in the corner, I didn't actually have to force this piece in the way I thought. I was able to just kind of roll it in the traditional way. I got a nice little gap here at the edge for my trim. That'll get covered up by the trim, no problem. All right guys, so I've showed you how to install laminate vinyl plank flooring in a basement situation, and mine looks great. Hopefully yours does too. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. See you next time.